and the quantity of drinking water for Nova Scotians. We take deliberate steps to provide Nova Scotians with water that is the cleanest achievable with the modern technology we have, Mr. Speaker, and provides security for public health. Because the health implications of unsafe drinking water are very severe. And that's why the Department has worked diligently to define a strategy that ensures safe drinking water supplies for our citizens. These challenges of safe drinking water are great. They demand new and innovative approaches. And so the Department is committed to a more scientific and pragmatic approach to policy creation and management. The drinking water strategy of 2002 that my colleague and my neighbouring MLA in King South was instrumental in creating was created with the intention of defining an approach to drinking water management that would ensure the sanctity of the supply of clean, safe drinking water. It incorporated the best science available to ensure quality outcomes, and it spurred the development of the Department of Environment and Labour's science strategy of 2005. Both the drinking water strategy of 2002 and the science strategy of 2005 are geared towards one goal, Mr. Speaker, ensuring that government policy is based on sound scientific principles when it comes to ensuring that Nova Scotians have access to good, clean, safe drinking water. So to do that, we rely on information that's current and that information is timely. And we recognize the need for cooperation amongst the stakeholders so that this common goal of delivering clean, safe drinking water to Nova Scotians is achieved. We in the Department can set standards, Mr. Speaker, but unless we work cooperatively with municipalities, those standards will be standards that are simply on paper and standards that won't reach the citizens that we want them to reach. The Drinking Water Strategy is a product of the Interdepartmental Drinking Water Management Committee. This committee, Mr. Speaker, brought forth experts from several departments: Environment and Labour, Health, Agriculture and Fisheries, Natural Resources, Service Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations, Tourism, Culture and Heritage, and a very important department, Mr. Speaker, run by a very able minister, very fair in how he allots his paving contracts, the Transportation and Public Works Minister. So what I'm trying to say by this is that this strategy was not simply a strategy. If you hear a sucking sound as I made that, Mr. Speaker, that probably can be read into the record. I think that would be fair to say that. This is not a Department of Environment initiative, Mr. Speaker. What I want to state is that this is an initiative that crosses many different departments in government because the whole government is committed and has shown substantive progress on ensuring that Nova Scotians have clean, safe drinking water. This multidisciplinary, multi-departmental approach is an approach that has worked well. And just as an aside, Mr. Speaker, having served and still being a member of the Crossing Boundaries Committee, a global or a national committee made up of municipal, provincial, and federal leaders politically and within the civil service, that increasingly with the issues that we have to face as a government, we're going to have to be able to work interdepartmentally and in cooperation with other people outside of government as well. The old system where departments could operate in isolation from each other, the technical word they use in silos, is gone. Departments need to be able to work on a horizontal basis, reaching out on these issues that cut across many different departments, doing so not with the attitude of trying to preserve their departmental budgets or power or influence, but working cooperatively for the good of Nova Scotians. And so on this Crossing Boundaries, we've talked about citizen-centered democracy. We've talked about citizen-centered services on both federal, municipal, and provincial levels. And I think the water management strategy that the province came up with is one example of how these different departments have been able to work together. And I think it's one that we want to give credit to the ministers who were involved at the time and also to the department staff and all those varied departments who work together cooperatively, Mr. Speaker, for for the good of Nova Scotians. And as I said, this is something that we need to work with municipalities on. One of the things that, as a MLA in a rural riding, one of the things that I've observed, that I'm sure the member from Kings West who's sitting there knows this as well, that when they come to me, they don't differentiate between municipal, provincial, and federal governments. They expect that I'll be able to help them. I'm the face of government to them. And so in this water strategy, not only do we have to work interdepartmentally, but we have to work, as I said, with municipalities, aiding them, supporting them, encouraging them, and most of all, ensuring that Nova Scotians have clean, safe drinking water. Another factor of this is that 40% of Nova Scotians are on private wells. I myself, Mr. Speaker, am on a private well. And to my chagrin, I think I've gone a little bit over a year without testing it. And Mr. Speaker, we in the department would encourage everyone on private wells to test their wells on a yearly basis because it's important that, that the testing be done in order to ensure that, that our citizens, that families, that children are drinking clean, safe drinking water, and we assist them in that process. We also support scientific research on this because we've reached out not only to municipalities but to the scientific community, and that's what we base our policy on, Mr. Speaker, scientific evidence, good, strong-based scientific evidence, and Dalhousie University has been a key source working with us in the areas of arsenic and haloacetic acids in drinking water. Now, there are three key accomplishments of drinking water strategy that I'm proud to share with you and that I'm really proud of our government. First, all municipal water utilities in the province now have consistent approvals that require them to meet clear provincial-wide standards for water treatment and operator certification. That's an important step that we've taken as a province. Secondly, about 1,800 small public drinking water supplies are now registered with the Department of Environment and Labour and are required to monitor their water quality and report problems to the department. Facilities such as restaurants, campgrounds, and schools that may have their own water supply. And thirdly, we have remained dedicated to our role as educators. The education documents we prepared as a department to help private well owners understand their role in protecting and testing their water has been a great success. As I mentioned further. And all our water utility operators, Mr. Speaker, tell us that they're now better prepared as a result of our education program to manage the responsibility bestowed upon them as keepers of our clean water. Mr. Speaker, our children are going to look to us for many things, but I think one of the key things that they're going to judge us on is how we cared for the environment, how we cared for the quality of the air, the quality of the soil, the beauty of our forests, and how we cared specifically for this very important resource, the resource of water. We talk so much, Mr. Speaker, about energy. I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., a very fascinating conference on energy, and the United States feels so threatened by the rising energy demands in the country of China. Interesting how they feel about that, and interesting in light of the fact that they're the greatest consumers of energy. But when you think about it, water is an even more precious resource than oil and gas. Not that they're not precious resources for the industrial society we have, but without water, we're really in trouble. Who would have thought, Mr. Speaker, who would have thought, even when I was in university, my first years, that we would be buying bottled water and paying more for that water than we pay for a liter of gasoline. And yet that's the case. Because people realize that water is an important commodity, and fortunately in Nova Scotia we have a government that has been working diligently, and I don't take credit for this at all, having been in the department for 1 week, enough time not to get any sleep and have my head spinning from all the briefing. The credit goes to my predecessors in all those departments I mentioned, and particularly I think to our fine civil servants. And Mr. Speaker, I know I'm coming to an end, but I do want to speak to our civil servants. I have been so impressed with the dedication of our civil servants. I speak across the board for my 7 years, but particularly now for this week in the Department of Environment and Labour, working hours beyond what anyone would expect for the remuneration they get to care for citizens. They see it, our civil servants, at least in the department I work in, see this task not simply as a job, but as some sort of calling to help provide the best government that they can provide for the citizens of this province. And I do want to thank them for that, and I am humbled actually by it. So I do want to boast a little bit, again, not on my own behalf, but boast about what the department's initiated, what this government's done on safe drinking water, and commit that we will continue to do efforts to make water in Nova Scotia safe for all Nova Scotians, and we can all have a glass to that.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a real privilege to rise to speak on this favorite topic of mine, which is the one of water. It's funny, you know, because we live in this province, which is one of the wettest of all of the provinces. We're surrounded by salt water, and yet 40% of the people in this province get their drinking water from a source that has gone largely ignored by the drinking water strategy produced by this province. We know that water is an essential good. 20% of the world does not have safe water at this moment, and the lack of safe potable water kills something like 4,500 children a day. Project that into the local circumstance, and you can see the magnitude of the problem of unsafe drinking water. The strategy does an excellent job on the protection of municipal water supplies, but as the member opposite has pointed out, some 40% of Nova Scotians do depend on groundwater, and it's the groundwater and the recharge of that resource which is essential not only to well owners but also to those who depend on the municipal supplies. It's interesting to note that some of the largest cities in the world at the moment, for instance New York, are quite willing to invest in source water protection, knowing that they will save themselves something like that their costs will be magnified tenfold if they have to deal with treatment in the plants when they could in fact be protecting their source water. It's an economic argument as well as a health and humane argument. Having said all this, it's very true, as the member opposite has pointed out, that water is affected by almost every activity that goes on in the province. Unfortunately, however, many of those activities in the province constitute nothing more than assaults on the groundwater quality here. They are such things as the movement of contaminated soils, a particular difficulty, brownfield sites which have gone unremediated, in other words, water flowing through contaminated sites, ending up in the groundwater recharge system. There are very severe questions around the application of biosolids of various sorts to agricultural lands, and of course, even in urban settings, there's the question of runoff of fertilizers and, worse, of pesticides into local watercourses and ultimately into the groundwater. We also have real difficulties with airborne pollutants, and of course perhaps the low amount of commitment that we have been able to demonstrate to our own lot in the Kyoto Protocol is evidence of what we may be doing to our water supplies. I would say that even the lack of a really comprehensive public transit strategy and a commitment to ensuring that public transit is in fact available to large numbers of our populations, that lack of a commitment ends up having an impact on air quality and ultimately soil quality and water quality as a result of that. Septage and sewage are similarly find themselves in the water table, and the loss of wetlands, whether through infilling or through the compromise of quality, is also a serious threat. Wetlands act as a natural filter, and to the degree that we are allowing them to be filled with rock and non-filtering, non-porous substances, we are in fact decimating the filtration, the natural filtration abilities of the soil. Having said all this, we also have some real problems with water quantity as well as quality. There are very few municipalities at this point across the country which look at quantity specifically, and the groundwater is essential to supply the municipal water supplies as well as wells. We've had a number of discussions in this House over well fields being drained in effect for the uses of consumers in other areas. This has happened in Cape Breton, it's happened in Sackville, it's happened in my own area. And there could be nothing more disconcerting than living for a long time in an area, depending on a well, and discovering that with the arrival of new development, that in fact the well field has been drained, and that there is not even adequate quantity of water for what has always in the past been. Some members may remember that I had introduced a bill on hydrogeological protection, hydrogeological surveys, permitting such surveys to be required as a condition of development applications. And I would still encourage this government to look at that as an option, because when there is disruption of the aquifer, the quantity is frequently diminished. This looks too at the need for planning by watershed area, and I think we should be looking very seriously at ensuring that the threats in one watershed are not transferred to become the threats to another. In connection with that, it's curious to note that, of course, even our federal government recently was willing to make an offer to make a deal to sell our water bottled to Saudi Arabia and to other dry countries. We've had, on a smaller scale, we export, I'm afraid I don't have the number in front of me, but very large quantities of water at very low fees from the province in the form of bottled water every year. And this too does in fact have an impact on our groundwater and the satisfactory levels of our aquifers. I would suggest that if we're really serious about groundwater protection, we need to be looking very seriously at soil protection. We need to be looking at the remediation of contaminated sites. We need to know not only that the material has been removed from a contaminated site, but where it has gone. Because as pointed out in the Municipal World article recently, and the IJC, the International Joint Commission, has in fact reported recently, some of the biggest threats to water quality are in fact what's euphemistically called waste disposal activities. And those waste disposal activities, legitimate or not, constitute a very, very serious menace to our drinking water and to the health and safety of humans and animals and plants alike. Until we know where the waste is going, we are not going to be able to really ensure that our drinking water supplies are safe. I have numerous cases in my constituency, which is theoretically an urban constituency. It falls inside the Halifax Regional Municipality, but large numbers of constituents do in fact depend on wells. And it's great to educate people about the need to test their wells. But I know people who cannot afford to test wells. And what happens in some neighborhoods is that 8 or 10 households will band together once every 2 years to pay for a water test for one of their wells. And that's just not good enough. So until we can make that testing affordable and accessible, then we really are not acting to protect the drinking water of those 40% of Nova Scotians who depend on the groundwater supplies. So I would say that education is fine, but affordability is key. I should note as well, it seems ironic at times that there are public housing facilities in this province which are literally supplied with bottled water because there is no adequate drinking water in the area. It does seem ironic that this would not have been dealt with. I mentioned infilling, and infilling is really a very serious problem in terms of the loss of wetlands, but also in terms of the contribution to the substances that are in the water. This is freshwater infilling that I'm talking about. The fact that we haven't, in fact, enacted any riparian protections is really shameful. That's to say, a municipality can enact that no building, and in certain designated activities, cannot take place closer than 50 or 100 feet, as the case may be, no closer than that to the edge of a watercourse. But if in fact it's possible to strip all the vegetation from that watercourse, one is inviting erosion, massive erosion, and everything that flows into the watercourse with it is in fact a compromise potentially to the water quality. So again, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and certainly great to see you here this evening for late debate and setting a good standard for the Speaker's chair, so I commend you for that. Certainly this is a very, very important topic brought forth by the Minister of the Environment and Labour, the member for Kings North, but I guess he had to hustle off to some other meeting or event this evening. But I do thank him for bringing this forward, and do appreciate the member opposite and her comments made on what is an important and also timely, I think, topic in light of the concerns that Nova Scotians do have with their drinking water. At the same time, a little bit surprised, perhaps, that this topic was brought forth as one of the first ones by the minister, because certainly over the past 6-7 years, since the life of this government in 1999, there have been a number of issues around drinking water. One in particular is the presence of THMs in water. And in 1999, when the Department of the Environment launched a test of community water supplies, there were 18 communities at that time that had the presence and unacceptably high levels of THMs in their drinking water. And certainly the chief medical officer of the day, which was Dr. Scott, he pointed out that when there are these higher levels of THMs in our water, in fact, there's about a 15% greater chance of getting cancer from drinking water, from drinking the water with those high levels. So it has become a concern and an issue for the department. And once again, in the year 2004, the number of communities with unacceptably high THMs was still at 10. So it is an issue that certainly has not gone away. It is important. It is, certainly worthy to point out that the number has decreased down to 10, which certainly has an improvement. And I think, however, it is still an area that we need to monitor very, very closely. And it would, in fact, and hopefully the minister will take a look at some of the comments that were made from the members opposite tonight, because it is an area that I'd like to see in 2006. Have we made further improvements, or are we at the same level, or in fact have things perhaps gotten a little worse? So THMs are a very, very important issue for our drinking water here in the province. One of the other, I guess, more recent studies and commentaries that I've heard is from the Clean Annapolis River Society, which have their headquarters down in the Annapolis Basin. And they've done quite an intensive, study involving satellite photography and looking at the amount of clear cutting that has been done in southwestern Nova Scotia and the impact that it is making on the quality of the water in the lakes, the levels of the lakes, because it affects the recharge, obviously, ability of those areas. So that's another whole sort of area, I guess, that we in Nova Scotia, where in fact we don't have an allowable limit for cutting our forests, I think it's an area that certainly needs a strong piece of investigative work, because certainly the Clean Annapolis River Foundation did make the statement, their expert science-based analysis is certainly that the quantity and the quality of our water due to excessive clear cutting is certainly having an impact on our lakes, on our groundwater, which indeed, as we know, is our drinking water. The other area that I think that we often perhaps don't take a strong enough look at, again, is the pollution that we have in our waters. If we take a look at the fact that in Nova Scotia, we still produce a tremendous amount of our electricity from burning coal and fossil fuels, and the one plant alone at Lingan is the third worst polluter in Canada. And when we take a look at the fact that we don't always have westerly winds prevailing, and certainly that fallout doesn't necessarily go out over the ocean, but in fact ends up in water supplies. And again, we know that this area in particular in Cape Breton has one of the highest, if not the highest, cancer rate in Canada. So again, perhaps a strong association with the drinking water. Then if we take a look at the convergence of air masses over Nova Scotia, where we have the northern air mass, the central air mass, and of course the Gulf Stream bringing all of the pollutants from those areas, especially the Ohio Valley, into Nova Scotia and impacting on our water supplies. In the last number of years, as our summers and early falls seem to have gotten much warmer, I know in the Annapolis Valley where I live, we have this haze covering the valley, which certainly was not very prominent years ago, which now does again affect the quality of our water, which again in our lakes and going into groundwater certainly is one of the areas that I think the department needs to be much more cognizant of. And I did welcome the comment made by the member opposite when talking about the well system and the source of 40 to 50% of the water from Nova Scotians. They use well water, or in fact, I have a system, and perhaps there are a few here that are aware that in the valley, if you live close to the valley floor, you can actually have a gravity-fed water system from a spring. And I have a gravity-fed water system in my home, fed from a spring. But once again, testing is critical to knowing what my water quality is indeed like. And I did learn quite a lesson first when I was using this source of water, in that an animal had gotten in the water supply, and of course, we in the household got sick, and we certainly heightened the number of times we tested our water, especially during spring and summer months. But I think it's now fair to say that the affordability and, in fact, accessibility are critical elements for the 40% of Nova Scotians who get water from wells. At one time, you could take your water sample down to the local hospital, and you, in fact, could at least find out if the coliform count of the water was high. And that at least gave you that little bit of assurance, especially through the warmer months, if in fact something adverse was happening to your water and you shouldn't be drinking. I think once again, as a province, we should be looking at greater accessibility for the private wells here in the province. But I think protection of our water bodies is a critical piece. We're going to have greater pressure to sell our water. There's no question that is coming at us, I think, very, very strongly. And in fact, it's interesting to note that when GPI did a major study about 5 or 6 years ago, they made one piece that I'd just like to draw a quick reference to, and that is 1/3 of Nova Scotians now spend about $300 a year on buying bottled water and filtration systems because they no longer have that great trust in their water supply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The time for debate has expired. We stand adjourned until 12 noon tomorrow.